The wind blew low through the valley that morning, carrying with it the cold scent of frost and old wood. Earl McKinney, a man whose boots had worn more leather than most men's entire herds, stood at his porch railing, mug of black coffee trembling slightly in his hands. He'd worked this land alone for the past 10 years, since his wife died, since his boy left for California, and never came back. The house wasn't much anymore, but it was his. Or so he thought. The knock came at 9:02 a.m. sharp, like a ledger entry. Standing on the porch was a young man in a navy suit and expensive sunglasses. His hair was neat. His shoes hadn't touched mud in years. He smiled, but not the kind of smile meant for kindness. "Mr. McKinney, I'm Miles Warner with Fairland Regional Bank. I'm here to deliver a notice of foreclosure and scheduled repossession." Earl didn't answer at first. He stared through him. The kind of stare that makes coyotes change their minds. "You must be mistaken," Earl said finally. "I paid my mortgage every month." "There were changes in the terms, sir. Adjustments to escrow, insurance clauses. I'm just the messenger." Earl took the envelope. Didn't open it. He looked past the man toward the fields. "5 generations worked this land," he said. "There's bones out there older than this damn bank." Miles smiled again. Progress always looks like theft to the people who don't keep up. The car pulled away, clean and black and soulless. Earl sat down in his rocking chair, the notice unopened in his hand. He sat there for hours. Didn't call his son. Didn't call a lawyer. He called the only man who ever said less and meant more. He called John Dutton. The truck pulled up at sundown. It was old, dusty, and louder than hell. John Dutton stepped out slow. No words. No rush. He walked up to Earl, still sitting on that chair. Looked him in the eye. Nodded. "Coffee?" Earl asked. John nodded once. Inside it was quiet. Pictures of horses, medals from the war, a faded wedding photo on the mantel. They sat in silence until the coffee burned low. Then John asked, "How much?" Earl slid the envelope across the table. John read. His jaw tensed. "They rewrote your loan in a bundled refinance. Variable rate buried in Clause C. You didn't sign this." "They said I did. Said I got a call. Some kind of digital signature." "They're lying." John stood. "We're going to fix this." "How?" Earl asked. John looked out the window. "Same way we fixed barbed wire in '84. One post at a time." They drove that night. Across 3 counties. John spoke to 2 other ranchers. Both had similar stories. Repossession letters. Digital documents they never saw. Escrow errors. By morning, John was back at the Dutton Ranch. He handed the envelope to Beth. "Find out who signed this, and who owns the debt now." Beth flipped through the papers, lips tight. "This isn't just a mistake. This is a network." John said nothing. Rip walked in. "We going to war?" John looked at him. "We already are." Beth's office looked more like a war room than a corporate suite. Files were everywhere, printed emails, land deeds, foreclosure logs, spreadsheets annotated in red ink. She hadn't slept in 2 days. At her side, a legal assistant typed furiously, cross-referencing property records with county filings. John stood at the doorway, arms crossed. "What do we have?" Beth pushed her laptop screen toward him. 32 properties in Gallatin County alone. All elderly owners. All sudden loan modifications approved remotely. Who signed off? Beth pointed to a name. Clay Harmon, Senior Asset Manager, Fairland Regional Bank. He's not just signing them. He's buying the debt through a shell company registered in Nevada, and then reselling it to developers. John's jaw tightened. Beth continued, "We found another 68 properties in Park, Sweetgrass, and Carbon counties. Same pattern. We're building the list." John walked out, went straight to Rip. "Get the truck. We're riding out." They drove for 12 hours, visiting names from Beth's list. Every story was a mirror of Earl's. A widow named June had been farming alone since '97. A Korean War vet named Henry had signed nothing, but got an eviction letter. A young rancher named Miguel, first-generation American, was told he defaulted because his property insurance lapsed during a wildfire. John listened, took notes, promised nothing. He returned home with fire in his veins. Beth had compiled the full list, 301 names. Mostly seniors, mostly rural, mostly alone. "They're not foreclosing land," she said. "They're erasing history." John called a meeting. The barn was full. Ranchers, loggers, store owners, teachers, all of them victims or neighbors of victims. "We didn't fight to build the West so banks could sell at auction," John said. "This ain't about money. This is about who we are." He presented the list. Earl spoke next. Quiet, dignified, fierce. "These men think silence is compliance. But this land taught us something different. When you see your neighbor fall, you ride." The room erupted. A plan formed. Beth would lead legal strategy. Jamie, begrudgingly, would draft a challenge based on predatory lending violations. Monica and tribal leaders would testify on ancestral land abuses. Rip organized patrols for those already threatened. Then came the call. A foreclosure team was scheduled to remove a widow named Clara, May, in 48 hours. John left that night. He arrived at dawn. Parked in the mud. Sat on Clara's porch. Didn't say a word. When the bank team showed up, they found John Dutton sitting with a cup of coffee, shotgun beside him. "You can try," he said, "but there won't be a second try." They left. The story hit the local paper. Then the regional news. Then the national headlines. Rancher defends widow from bank eviction. Dutton family leads resistance. Donations poured in. Lawyers volunteered. Retired judges called Beth. John looked at the list again that night. Then he lit a fire. Not to destroy it. To warm his hands for the work ahead. The morning sun painted the valley in gold, but the mood at the Dutton ranch was heavier than the clouds that rolled above the mountains. John stood by the fence line, watching the herd in silence. In his hand, he held the full list, 301 names, 301 lives the bank wanted to erase. Beth walked up behind him. "They're pushing back." "How?" "They've filed for injunctions against our protests. They're labeling it as interference with legal proceedings." John folded the paper and placed it in his jacket. "Let them come. But next time, they won't find me sitting." By noon, the barn was filled with locals again. Not just ranchers this time. Teachers, mechanics, mail carriers, all facing similar threats. Jamie Dutton, standing stiffly at the edge of the crowd, stepped forward to speak. "They're exploiting a loophole in Montana's emergency finance law," he said. "It was meant for wildfire relief. Now they're using it to declare unclaimed liens on any property without updated filings in 5 years. An old rancher in the back yelled, "Half of us don't even have internet." "That's the point," Jamie said. "They made it legal to rob the forgotten." John stepped forward. "Then it's time we remind them we're not forgotten." He laid down the plan. A legal task force led by Beth and Jamie. A communications network powered by retired radio operators and college volunteers. A rideshare program for the elderly to get to county offices and fight filings. And a last resort, an encampment. A line in the dirt. They chose a place called Cutler Pass. It sat between the 3 counties most affected, symbolic, strategic, and sacred. It once served as a cavalry watchpoint. Now it would be a defense line. They built it in 3 days. Fencing, tents, flags, fire pits, portable generators, old RVs, banners that read, "We remember who built this." Media crews arrived. So did the opposition. Fairland Bank's security subcontractors drove by daily. Unmarked cars took photos. A helicopter buzzed the ridge. But the people held. Inside the tent, John drafted what he called the oath. "We are the soil beneath your shoes, the hands that fed your cities. You do not erase us with digital ink. You do not bury us beneath bureaucracy. We will not be moved." They all signed it, one by one, including Clara May, who stood with tears in her eyes. "They tried to take my home," she said, "but they can't take my name off this land." Beth found a break in the bank structure. A compliance failure, a missing annual audit that invalidated half the foreclosures. It was enough for a state hearing. Jamie filed the motion. But then came the sabotage. The encampment was hit at night. Generators stolen. Livestock let loose. Rip and Case caught the culprits, 2 young men hired by a private security firm, carrying burner phones and burner IDs. They didn't press charges. John made them deliver a message instead. "You tell your boss," he said, "we're not farmers fighting weather. We're warriors remembering who we are." The next day, federal observers arrived. The hearing was greenlit. John stood on a stage, in front of cameras, legislators, and the people of Montana. He read the oath. He told the story of Earl. He named names. And he ended with this: "If you think we'll let you erase 5 generations of sacrifice with a court order, you're not just wrong. You're lost." The crowd rose. Applause like thunder. Beth whispered, "You just drew the line." John nodded. Now, let's see who crosses it. The storm hit at 3:14 a.m. Not wind or rain, silence. First the power went out. Then the comms. Radios jammed. Generators disabled. Lights snuffed out one by one like dying stars across the Dutton Ranch and the Cutler Pass encampment. John was already up. He felt the shift, like a predator stepping into the dark. Rip burst through the door. Generators are cut. Fencing's down. We got movement on the ridge. Get case. Light the ridge markers. Wake everyone. The perimeter lit up with flares. Shapes moved in the trees, fast, disciplined. They weren't looters. They were professionals. Rip raised his rifle. Permission. Not yet, John said. Let them know we see them. But don't give them what they want. For 20 minutes, they circled, then retreated. By morning, the signs were clear. Sabotage. Psychological warfare. Beth slammed a file onto the table. They're calling it an unauthorized militia formation. They're trying to brand us as extremists. Jamie looked up from his phone. And I just got word they're filing an emergency injunction to seize Cutler Pass under federal safety codes. They're not fighting a case anymore, John said. They're fighting a war. He called a council. Ranchers, tribal leaders, legal allies, veterans, journalists. They met under the main tent. John stood before them with the oath in one hand and a satellite photo of armored trucks in the other. They'll come again. Not in court. Not in daylight. And when they do, we don't flinch. He turned to Beth. How much time do we have? 72 hours. Then the hearing on our injunction. If they shut us down before then, we lose momentum. Case stood. We hold the pass. They began digging in. Roadblocks built from old steel gates and tractors. Drones deployed. Live streams activated 24/7. Every night, locals brought food. Kids drew signs. Elders prayed. Veterans checked every corner. Then came Clay Harmon. He arrived in a black Range Rover. Walked alone to the center of the camp. Slick suit. Snake smile. I represent Fairland and its development partners, he said. What's happening here, it ends now. John stood inches from him. You already ended it when you tried to throw an old man off his porch. Clay smirked. That porch is scheduled for demolition. And you, Mr. Dutton, you'll be held liable for inciting civil unrest. John didn't blink. This is a warning. You cross that line again, we won't use lawyers. The cameras caught it. The internet exploded. Hashtag Dutton line trended worldwide. The bank doubled down. Within 48 hours, corporate PR firms released ads portraying John as a radical. News anchors questioned his finances. Anonymous sources leaked false claims of tax evasion. Beth countered. She aired depositions from Clara, Earl, Miguel. She released the list. She showed the missing audits. She revealed Harmon's shell companies. The tide turned. Journalists embedded. Hollywood actors tweeted support. Retired generals offered counsel. Then, the unthinkable. A small fire broke out on the eastern ridge. Controlled, but suspicious. John and Rip traced the source. A timing device. Military grade. Next time, Rip said, it won't be a warning. That night, John sat at the fire with Earl. You ever think it'd come to this? John asked. Earl shook his head. Not like this. But we always knew we'd have to stand. One way or another. The next morning, the court hearing began, virtually, live-streamed across the country. Beth and Jamie led the charge. They presented the audits, the testimonies, the shell corporations, the fabricated signatures. A retired judge named Anderson presided. I fought in Korea, he said, and I buried friends who believed land meant freedom. This is not freedom. He granted a temporary injunction against all bank activity in the affected counties. But then came the retaliation. Federal agents arrived with search warrants. They raided Beth's firm, seized files, claimed cybersecurity threats. John called a press conference. One microphone. No speechwriters. You can't scare us, he said. You can't silence us. We don't kneel to corruption. We plow through it. The applause didn't stop. And across Montana, people began drawing lines in their own dirt. They called it the People's Trial, not because of some legal classification, but because of where it was held. The county courthouse had been deemed insecure due to fire threats. So they moved the hearing to the only building big enough to hold the crowd and bold enough to let the people speak, the rodeo arena at the Gallatin County Fairgrounds. Bales of hay became barriers. Bleachers hosted retirees, children, and cattlemen. Flags waved. Cameras flashed. And in the center of it all stood a single long table. Beth, Jamie, and a young veteran attorney named Ryan Calhoun sat at one end. Across from them, representatives from Fairland Bank, government regulators, and two tight-jawed developers. Judge Anderson presided. John Dutton sat behind the table, his hands clasped, his eyes cold and quiet. He wouldn't speak until it mattered. Beth opened with fire. "We are not here to renegotiate theft. We are here to end it." She laid out the web: predatory contracts, digital forgeries, illegal liens, off-books sales. Every point backed by evidence. Then came the testimonies. Earl took the stand. So did Clara, Miguel, June, even the widow of a foreclosed veteran, holding his dog tags in hand. The crowd wept. They cheered. They stood. Then it was the bank's turn. Clay Harmon testified. Smooth. Cold. "We followed market procedures. The people failed to adapt." Beth cross-examined. "Do you consider a 93-year-old man with no internet access digitally negligent? If he can't manage?" Beth cut him off. "Then maybe the system is broken, not the man." Next came Ryan. His voice calm, his questions surgical. "Can you confirm that your shell companies were registered to the same address as your golf club?" Objection. Withdrawn. "But the people now know." Beth closed with the line that cracked headlines. "You didn't just take their land. You tried to take their past. That's unforgivable. But we're here to forgive nothing." Judge Anderson recessed for deliberation. The arena waited. Outside, people held candles, prayed, sang. Hours later, the judge returned. "I've read the filings. I've heard the voices. And I know this: a system that profits from silence must be broken by noise." He ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. All foreclosures halted. Investigations opened. Properties returned. Fines issued. The crowd erupted. But John did not stand. He leaned to Earl. "It's not over." "I know," Earl said, "but it's a damn good start." As the sun set, John walked alone through the arena. Where rodeos once crowned cowboys, the soil had now crowned justice. And the people, they were just getting started. The air in Helena was thick with anticipation. For weeks after the people's trial, the nation had watched Montana not as a frontier state, but as the front line of a moral reckoning. Networks ran specials titled "The Last Stand of the West." Editorials called for sweeping reform. Protesters and supporters camped outside state buildings. But for John Dutton, the noise didn't matter. What mattered was the paper in his hand, the docket for the state Supreme Court appeal. Fairland Bank had doubled down, asking the court to reverse the people's trial ruling and legitimize the foreclosures. Beth paced in the old Capitol hallway. They're betting on fatigue, hoping the country moves on. John didn't answer. He was staring out at the statue of a pioneer family. Then he whispered, "We don't move on. We move forward." The courtroom was packed. News cameras were barred, but artists filled sketchbooks with the tension of the moment. At the defense table sat Harmon and his legal team. Polished, cold. At the petitioner's side, John, Beth, Jamie, Ryan, and Earl, flanked by veterans, tribal leaders, and every face the bank tried to erase. The Chief Justice addressed the court. "This case has grown beyond contracts. It asks us, what is justice when law becomes commerce?" Jamie opened for the people. "This isn't a debate over fine print. It's a confrontation with conscience." Harmon's attorney argued financial logic, market volatility, standard practices. Beth rebutted with passion and precedent. There's no standard where theft becomes law. Then John was called. He walked slowly to the podium, took his hat off. "I didn't come here to play lawyer," he said. "I came here because the West is watching. And if you rule against the people today, they won't just lose homes. They'll lose faith." He paused. "I don't care about headlines. I care about legacy. And I know this. Legacy doesn't get bought. It gets bled for." The silence that followed felt like prayer. The justices adjourned. It took them 5 hours. The decision unanimous. The verdict upheld. The people's trial stood. All appeals denied. Regulatory overhauls recommended. Outside, the cheers echoed like a thunderstorm rolling across the plains. John didn't smile. He turned to Earl. "Let's go home." Back at the ranch, the wind was warm. Clara was back in her kitchen. Miguel opened a youth riding school. Earl sat on his porch with his dog. And John? He saddled up. rode to the ridge, stood beneath the sky. He placed a hand on the dirt. "You held us," he said. "Now we hold you." If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the value of land, the quiet strength of the just, and the power of legacy, leave a like to show the world that honor still matters. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next battle John Dutton fights against a world that forgot what justice looks like. Because here, justice still has a name, and it's Dutton.